The facade of Democratic support for immigrants and amnesty for decades, the Democratic Party has positioned itself as the champion of immigrant rights and comprehensive immigration reform. Yet a closer examination reveals a pattern of broken promises, performative rhetoric, and a lack of substantive action. The narrative that Democrats unconditionally care about immigrants and their struggles falls apart when scrutinized against their legislative inaction, selective advocacy, and political compromises that have left millions of immigrants vulnerable and without a path to stability. Historical context. Broken promises on immigration reform. The Democratic Party has repeatedly pledged to overhaul the immigration system and provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented individuals. From the early 2000s to the present, multiple administrations, including those led by Democratic presidents, have failed to deliver on these promises. While campaign trail speeches are filled with calls for compassion and reform, these pledges often dissipate when Democrats gain power. For instance, during the Obama administration, despite controlling both the House and Senate for 2 years, the Democrats failed to pass the much-anticipated comprehensive immigration reform. Instead, the administration oversaw record-high deportations, earning President Obama the nickname Deporter-in-Chief. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, while helpful to many, was an executive action rather than a durable legislative solution, leaving it vulnerable to future administrations, as seen during the Trump years. Amnesty. A hollow commitment with great potential. Democrats have long used the promise of amnesty as a tool to garner votes from immigrant communities. Yet the reality tells a different story. Amnesty requires more than lip service. It requires legislative courage and prioritization. Bills addressing immigration reform, such as the DREAM Act, have languished in Congress for years, often abandoned in favor of other political priorities. Even when there was momentum for reform, such as during the Biden administration's early days, immigration reform was sidelined. Democrats chose to focus on infrastructure and other domestic policies, leaving immigrant communities to face continued uncertainty and hardship. Their inaction perpetuates a cycle of vulnerability for millions of undocumented immigrants who remain exploited, marginalized, and fearful of deportation. However, the economic case for amnesty is clear. A comprehensive pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants is estimated to add $1.5 trillion to the U.S. economy over a decade. This boost would come from increased tax contributions, consumer spending, and entrepreneurship, further strengthening America's financial stability. Beyond economic benefits, amnesty addresses labor shortages, supports Social Security, and reflects the values of fairness and opportunity foundational to the nation's identity. Selective advocacy and silenced Democratic leaders often pick and choose when to vocalize support for immigrants. High-profile cases or moments of political gain see Democrats rallying around immigrant rights, but systemic issues like detention abuses, family separations, and workplace exploitation receive scant attention. Notably, when undocumented immigrants married to U.S. citizens sought presidential immigration pardons, their struggles were largely ignored by the same politicians who claimed to fight for immigrant families. Prominent Democrats, such as Senator Patty Murray and Senator Maria Cantwell, have been notably silent on critical immigration issues. Despite their positions of power, their failure to champion reforms or push for bold action reflects a broader apathy within the party. Instead of addressing the root causes of immigrant struggles, these leaders often avoid politically inconvenient topics, leaving their constituents to feel abandoned. Vice President Kamala Harris, who ran for president, has also failed to speak up about critical legislation, such as the American Families United Act, which could reunite families torn apart by immigration laws. Similarly, Harris and other presidential candidates from both major parties, Republican and Democratic, have remained silent on the urgent need for a National Workers' Compensation Commission to address the erosion of workers' rights across state lines. Notably, figures from third parties, such as Green Party's Dr. Jill Stein or Socialist Kshama Sawant, have also failed to prioritize or meaningfully advocate for immigrants and workers in their platforms. The lack of leadership on these issues underscores a bipartisan and cross-ideological failure to address systemic injustices affecting millions. Former President Donald Trump, whose own wife is an immigrant and whose immigration process drew significant public attention, has also failed to address the broader systemic failures of U.S. immigration policy. Trump had a unique opportunity to speak up for American citizens affected by the deportation of their spouses, including many of his own voters. Yet his administration focused on restrictive policies that ignored the human cost. This failure reflects a broader issue across party lines. America's political leadership has consistently neglected to protect the human rights of both its citizens and immigrants, leaving families fractured and communities in despair. Elite's betrayal. The push for exclusivity adding to the systemic neglect is the recent push by figures like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to prioritize elite immigrants through programs like the EB-1 Einstein visa, similar to the one used by Melania Trump. This approach excludes a majority of hard-working immigrant laborers who sustain industries like agriculture, construction, and healthcare. These elites argue for intellectual and economic exclusivity, even as they acknowledge systemic challenges such as a declining population and the strain on programs like Social Security, which require a younger, robust labor force to remain solvent. This hypocrisy is glaring. On one hand, Musk warns of population decline. On the other, policies championed by him and others focus on elite visas while ignoring the millions of immigrants who could revitalize the labor force. Simultaneously, the U.S. spends over $850 billion on detention centers and incarceration systems, enriching private companies and investors at the expense of human dignity. Instead of addressing systemic labor shortages with solutions like amnesty, political leaders on both sides profit from incarceration-driven policies that exploit and dehumanize vulnerable populations. Selective citizenship. The GOP's elite immigration hypocrisy, the Republican Party's immigration policies, reveal a stark hypocrisy. While advocating for stringent measures that disproportionately affect undocumented laborers, the backbone of America's development, several prominent figures within the party, including President-elect Donald Trump's appointees and allies, have direct immigrant backgrounds or personal histories that expose the inconsistencies in their stance. Notable figures with immigrant ties. Kash Patel. Nominated as FBI director, Patel was born in New York to Indian Gujarati immigrant parents who fled ethnic repression in East Africa. Elon Musk. Born in South Africa, Musk became a U.S. citizen in 2002. His high-profile success stories starkly contrast with the struggles of many low-income immigrants. Vivek Ramaswamy. Born in the U.S. to Indian immigrant parents, Ramaswamy has advocated for ending birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants, despite benefiting from his parents' legal immigration. Melania Trump. Born in Slovenia, Melania Trump became a U.S. citizen in 2006. Her path to citizenship has faced scrutiny, particularly regarding allegations that she worked in the U.S. while undocumented. Melania's controversial modeling work reportedly took place before she had secured proper work authorization. This alleged violation of immigration laws directly contradicts the hardline stance taken by her husband and his allies on undocumented workers, highlighting the double standards applied when immigration benefits the elite. Usha Vance. Wife of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, Usha is the daughter of Indian immigrants. Her family's immigrant story is emblematic of the opportunities sought by millions, but increasingly restricted by current GOP policies. Despite their personal or familial immigrant experiences, these individuals often support policies that make legal immigration pathways inaccessible to many, favoring the elite and intellectuals while marginalizing economically disadvantaged immigrants. For example, programs like the EB-5 visa grant green cards to those who can invest substantial capital, exemplifying preferential treatment for the wealthy, while offering limited viable legal paths for poorer individuals. Why the silence? Punishment over progress. When politicians on both the left and the right seem more focused on punishing individuals rather than helping American citizens, one has to ask, why? Why is no one speaking up loudly and clearly for American citizens who are bearing the brunt of these systemic failures? Instead of prioritizing solutions that uplift families, strengthen communities, and ensure fairness, both parties appear entrenched in a punitive mindset, choosing division over unity and punishment over progress. This approach neglects the very people they were elected to serve and exacerbates the suffering of vulnerable populations. Conclusion: a call for accountability, the facade that Democrats are the unwavering allies of immigrants and amnesty advocates must be dismantled. It is time for the party to be held accountable for its failures and empty promises. Immigrant communities deserve more than symbolic gestures. They need meaningful action, durable policies, and leaders willing to fight for their rights without hesitation or compromise. As the Democratic Party continues to lose credibility among immigrant communities, the question remains: will they finally rise to the occasion, or will their inaction further alienate the very people they claim to represent? Similarly, will Republican leaders step beyond fear-based policies to offer real solutions? Without action, America will continue to fail in protecting the human rights of its citizens and immigrants alike.